Tell me your name, your occupation, and where you're from.
Sure, I'm Adrian Hayes-Santos, and I'm a Gainesville City Commissioner for District 4, and I was born in Vancouver, Canada.
How would you define democracy?
I would define democracy by people having their voice heard, by people being able to elect the representatives. But I think there's some other things that come with that as well. It's not just as pure as that. I think and one of the most important things, and one of the things we're having struggles with now, is the freedom of information and making sure that people that people are all looking at the same thing. We're looking at the same truth. And when we're in places now where there's these bubbles that are happening, democracy seems to get split. We start to have kind of different worlds that we're in, and when you start to get that, I think you lose democracy. Democracy is so when everyone, I think, is looking at the same facts, same reality. They may be getting different viewpoints from that same reality, but they're at least seeing the same thing, and we're losing that in our country today.
Tell me about a time you first participated in a political function, and from there, how did you get then into civil service, civic service?
So the first time I remember kind of seeing a politician in person was at when Jeb Bush was running for governor here in Florida. He came to my high school. He did a forum at our high school. This was, I think, in 1998. And I remember I got up and asked a question. It was a question about abortion, what his thoughts were on that. He definitely is someone who's kind of more of an anti-choice candidate, but I think it was important that we bring those questions up.
And democracy is associated with the United States. Tell me about your experience with democracy, maybe in other places.
Sure. So I do have I'm a citizen of Canada, the United States, and Brazil. So those are all a wide kind of ranges of democracy too. I mean, Brazil has had significant struggles with democracy, with dictators taking over and coups and struggles there. Canada, I say, has probably been very stable in terms of democracy, and I think the Canadian democracy is very similar to kind of the United States democracy in terms of kind of how people feel about it and how the will to vote. But in Brazil, it's actually mandatory. You are mandated to vote, and many countries have that. I think that's kind of lost a lot of times in the United States. People don't realize that in Brazil, you get fined if you don't vote.
So what are your civic responsibilities as an American?
When we look at what our civic responsibilities are as Americans, I think we're lucky. We're in a country where you can pick and choose how civically responsible you want to be. You can not vote, you can not participate, you can go off in the woods and never have to deal with anything ever again in our country. Or you can be involved, and anyone can run for office. There's no restrictions on your race, how much money you have, or things like that. So I think we have a wide range of civic responsibilities that we can move forward on. And you can either run for office, you can advocate, you can write letters to your congresspersons, and you can go out there and create even political committees and be able to gather other people around you to have your voice heard at different legislative levels. So I think we're very lucky in the United States to be able to people can choose how they want to interact with the democracy. Many countries, it's either forced on them or they're not allowed to be a part of the democracy.
So tell me about a memorable voting experience that you've had.
I think probably the most memorable voting experience for me was when I was running for office, and it was during the presidential primary, and I was running for city commission for the current seat that I had. This was back in 2016, and it was seeing my name on the same ballot as Donald Trump was on there, Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders. It was kind of a surreal moment to be in the voting booth and seeing kind of my name on the same ballot, running for different races, but being on the same ballot as our current president and other people who are running for office at such a large level.
How do people in your community, which is Gainesville, work together for the common good? Or do they?
how do we work together for the common good here in Gainesville? I think it's an interesting question because I think I remember when I first got into office, our clerk had been there for 25 years. So he had seen a long, long time of different commissions and different political atmospheres. And since the election in 2016, things had changed dramatically. I came in before the presidential election and have served now since then. And the people are much more active than they ever have been before. They're on both sides. You see kind of a further on the far left side and the far right side are just much more active, much more louder than they've been before. More people are coming to meetings. So I think it's a good thing that people now are much more active in their government and having their voices heard. They're one of, I think, the things that has caused some issues is there's been a loss of trust in our government. I think this is at the local level, the state level, and the federal level. And that starts to kind of cause some concerns of when people are advocating for things and they don't trust their government, it starts to cause this, in essence, not partisanship in the terms of Democrats and Republicans, and partisanship between like the trust between elected officials and the public in general. And that dichotomy is happening more. And then with our press of having 24-hour news cycles and just constant kind of saying the world is on fire kind of things, it starts to cause, I think, more issues in the sense of the trust is being lost with our elected officials. But people are getting involved more. There's more organization. We had a meeting a couple days ago about equity in our city, and I think over 150 to 200 people came out about how the city of Gainesville was an address equity in our community.
And the final question, what issues do people in our community talk about on a daily basis?
So looking at what issues do people talk about in our community on a daily basis, I think there's a few different issues. I think equity is one of the largest issues now that's being talked about. Racial equity. We're a city in the South that has had incredible segregation since we were founded. And many of those policies have carried over throughout the years, and those ramifications of those policies are still affecting the people of our community. And I think we're at a point now in our city that the community and elected officials realize that we can't just keep going down the same path we're going. We have to address these racial segregations that have been in our community and to change those. So we're seeing that in housing, we're seeing that in transportation, but I think equity is the number one issue that people realize that we can't just keep going down this path of wide ranges of racial discrepancies between.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. Tell me your name, your occupation, and where you live.
David Arreola. I'm a Gainesville City Commissioner for District 3.
How would you define democracy?
Democracy is one of the oldest forms of government that we've been able to come up with, and there's so many ways that it's been manifested successfully. You've had direct democracies where citizens directly vote on policy, and that was what they had in ancient times in Greece. What we see today is more representative democracy, where you vote for a representative, or in our case, you vote for your councilman, your congressional representative, your senator. For now, we're voting for our presidents. I think that it's really important that when people think about democracy, it's about using your voice and having the right to vote and having that vote count. There were so many ways that voting rights have changed. For the longest time, voting rights were specifically for land-owning white persons, and that took centuries to change, and we're beginning to see the effect of that change. So, democracy doesn't have just one meaning. It should have a different meaning to every single person, but the most important thing I think that you find consistent with every democracy that has ever existed is the commitment that everyone has a voice and nobody is above the law.
Tell me about a time when you participated in a political function, particularly maybe as a young person.
Well, a lot. I was very involved in politics when I was young. It was something that I thought I wanted to get involved in. So I guess it's hard to sort of pick one function out of that memory bank that I've got. But I would say probably the most interesting experience I've had so far was getting to go to the 2016 Democratic National Convention as a delegate for Secretary Clinton, and getting to actually have one-on-one conversations with Senators Cory Booker, Senators Lauren Book, and really getting to, I got to meet Senator Bernie Sanders. The nominee, Secretary Clinton, was a little bit hard to get to, but
Sure.
to be within maybe a couple hundred feet from President Obama, and to be in a place where, this is the culmination of the constitutional republic, the creation of political parties, and for those parties to select their nominees and go through the democratic process. That's how we elect our leaders in this country, by Americans, and to be there, it was really a moment where I felt like, this republic is still going strong, and I hope that we can continue that.
Tell me about your first time voting. Is that seared into your brain?
I wouldn't say that filling out a paper is seared into my brain, but I remember who I first voted for, and that was President Obama. I was able to vote for him, and it was a moment that I'll remember because I was very passionate about his candidacy. I thought that he brought tremendous promise, and also to be able to be a part of the generation that elected the first black man president, I think was extremely significant. Again, going back to that progress we're trying to make with the democratic ideal, that democracy is not meant to be tyranny of the minority or even the majority, but it's supposed to be an arena where everyone abides by the same rules, abides by the same laws, and is given the same right to inquire and also to have their voices heard.
Okay. What do you see as your civic responsibilities as an American?
I've always believed that as Americans, we are brought up in a different way than most of the other countries. We, from a young age, we tell our children that they live in the greatest country in the world, that they can say whatever they want, that they can have a right to vote for their leaders, and that their leaders are supposed to follow them. That's pretty exceptional when you raise a whole generation of Americans that way. There's a responsibility that comes with that. And I think our civic responsibility can be boiled down to the fact that how can we have a country where we spend, however many millions of dollars on a 30-second Super Bowl ad and have starving children in this country? How can we have a country where we spend billions and billions on pets, but we have able-bodied people who can't find work in many parts of this country who are being forgotten? So I think our civic responsibility as Americans is to take care of one another, to make sure that there's opportunities for everyone. And if we can't do that, who will?
What issues do people in Gainesville talk about locally, statewide, and nationally?
Well, Gainesville's a pretty interesting city. We've got our local issues where we talk about how we can build a more vibrant city and increase economic opportunity for people. The biggest conversation, of course, being that legacy of institutionalized racism that this university promulgated for over a century and that this city was part and parcel to. Now, things have changed a little bit, but racism and institutionalized racism don't go away in a generation. So we're still having that active conversation about how do we repair that damage, not just in terms of economics, but in terms of culture. Right now, it very much seems like in Gainesville, you talk to anybody, they'll tell you there's two Gainesville. There's the West Gainesville and there's East Gainesville. And so my challenge as an elected official is to get people to believe that we can make one city out of two.
How do national events like July 4th or Memorial Day or Veterans Day, or even in Gainesville you have homecoming, how do they unite people from different backgrounds?
Well, you know,
Or do they?
holidays are holidays, and I think that you know, people appreciate the opportunity to take a day off from work and be with family and friends. You know, I would hope that you know, what these holidays really are is an opportunity to reflect on some of the principles of what it means to be an American and to live here in this country. You know, you think of July 4th, the principle of independence, that this country is to be independent from foreign influence. I think of Memorial Day, and we think of the people who have given their lives for the principles of this country. Veterans Day, people who are still here with us and the honor that we need to give them for what they've given for this country. So these things are all very good.
Okay. All right, good. We're done. Okay, tell me your name, your occupation, and where you live.
My name is Emma Donnelly. I'm a student at the University of Florida, and I'm from Gainesville, Florida.
Okay. How would you define democracy?
I would define democracy as everyone having an equal say. I think that that's really at the core of it. And if everyone's voice doesn't count equally, then I don't think it's really democracy.
Tell me about a time you have participated in a political function.
The political function that I participated in that was the most important to me was in 2018, during my senior year of high school. There was, unfortunately, the horrible shooting in Parkland, and it just felt like all these kids in high school, like, we had to do something because we couldn't vote. And so we got together, and all these kids all over Florida, and in Gainesville we organized a youth forum at the Hippodrome with the River Phoenix Center for Peace Building. And we just sort of got together and started talking about things and how we felt. I think it's important to talk things out like that and see what we want to do for the future.
Talk about the fact that you're going to be voting for the first time in a presidential election and what that means to you.
It means a lot to me that I'll finally get to vote in the presidential election this year. In 2018, I got to vote in the midterms, which of course was fantastic, and we had some great wins, also we had some results that I wasn't as happy with, but at least I got to vote. And it was so frustrating being a high school student before I was 18 and being aware enough about what was going on in the country that I felt like I should have a say, but not being old enough to have a say yet. You feel kind of trapped before you can vote, I think. That's why voting's so important, because you can finally have a say. And even if things don't go your way, at least you got to try.
How do you see your civic responsibilities are as an American?
As an American, I see my civic responsibilities as, first of all, voting. I think that's the key to our democracy. Everyone has to vote and participate, otherwise only some people's votes are heard. Also, I think it's just as important to talk about the issues that you're passionate about with your friends, family, and even people you don't know, because you don't know how much what you say could impact what someone else thinks.
What issues on a local, state, and national level do people in Gainesville talk about? What are the important issues?
On a local level, I think that the issue I hear about most is education. In Alachua County and all across Florida, I think that the public schools are underfunded. And I hear lots of parents get frustrated. I babysit for lots of families around Gainesville, and lots of parents get frustrated because they feel like their tax-paying money is not well spent because they finally have kindergartners and students in school, and they're starting to look at private schools and think about pulling them out. And of course, there's many families who can't afford to do that either. So I think on a local level, education is the most talked about issue. Well, in Gainesville, the thing that I see my peers talking about the most is climate change. It's something that people in my generation have a lot of anxiety about because it was something that has been impacted so greatly by the older generations, but we haven't really had a say in. And we're going to be the ones who have to clean it up.
National events like 4th of July or Memorial Day or Veterans Day, how do they unite people from different backgrounds in your community?
I think that the national event that unites people in my community the most would be Memorial Day. We have on 8th Avenue, there's a memorial to the veterans. And it's a place that a lot of people go and walk along with their families and their friends and pay their respects to the people who served our country in war. As far as other national events go, unfortunately, I'm not sure that the other ones really have brought people together in so much in Gainesville. I don't think that there's as many community building events for the other national holidays, but certainly for Memorial Day there is.
Okay, so finally, how do people in Gainesville work together for the common good, or do they?
I would say that there are a lot of great programs in Gainesville. I've always thought Gainesville was a pretty special place, having the influence of the university, and there's this constant change and movement because of the students here and because they're pushing forward the things that they think are important for the future. At times, I think that there isn't enough outreach with the community in Gainesville. Certainly, the university has had somewhat of a complicated role with some groups in Gainesville because it's been sort of a divided city. But I think more and more the students are interested in getting to know the community, and they're pushing for more and more changes locally and nationally.
Great.
Thanks.
Okay, could you tell me your name, your occupation, and where you live?
Sure. My name is Harvey Ward. I'm a Gainesville City Commissioner representing District 2, which is kind of northwest Gainesville, and I live in northwest Gainesville off Glen Springs Road.
How did you get into civic service and politics?
It's interesting. My grandfather was very active in kind of behind the scenes in local politics when I was a kid and before I was a kid, so there are always family stories about that. And I always found it intriguing, and he and my parents always encouraged me to pay attention to what's going on, to read the paper and to pay attention to national politics as well as what was going on in Tallahassee and in our town. So it was always on my radar, and I got active in other people's campaigns a long time ago. And I was always just kind of around it. And I reached a point where I felt like in my life, in my family's life, in my career, it was time for me to take a turn at it. And it's been very rewarding. I've really enjoyed the high points as well as the low points.
So how would you define democracy?
To me, democracy is the process of the people, we the people, being involved in the decisions that affect our lives. Obviously, we all make thousands of decisions every day that impact ourselves and our family and the people around us. But democracy is that next step, taking the opportunity to go beyond your backyard and beyond your workplace, to work with other people in your community, in your neighborhood, to talk about the things that affect all of us and shape the direction of our community.
Tell me about a particularly important political function that you have attended or been involved in. Could be as a child, as an adult, that kind of shaped your vision of what democracy is.
Wow, there have been a lot of things. Been to a lot of rallies and things as a kid, and being in Gainesville, we have the opportunity to bump into lots of people that other communities might not. We're not a big town, but people come through here to places like the Graham Center and other places over the years at UF that give us an opportunity to have interactions with people like Bob Graham and with people like Lawton Childs and other folks who I have always thought of as really representing democracy in Florida and representing community in Florida. I know Senator Graham certainly, in my conversations with him, is so focused on civic education and has always kind of embodied that. And as a kid, I would watch, and as a teen, I would watch him on the news and think, wow, that guy's, he cares about what we're doing. But one of the coolest things that I was ever involved in was, I guess this would have been it was sometime in the 90s, probably 94 or so, when Lawton Childs was running for re-election. He and Buddy McKay and Bob Graham and Jimmy Buffett made a kind of a whistle-stop sort of thing at the Gainesville airport and had just a last-minute notice that they were going to be there. And I was able to get off work and go out there and talk to each one of them. And, you know, here's the governor of Florida who's making time to talk to people who just showed up, you know, drove in off Waldo Road and made time to talk with all of us. But Senator Graham took the extra step of, you know, he's famous for those notebooks that he's kept. He spent probably 10 minutes talking to me about what I did for a living and, you know, what my life was like here in Gainesville, and just taking notes. And this guy's a United States Senator, and he's got time to talk to not just me, but everybody else, the couple hundred other folks who just showed up. That was, that's an example of great public service to me.
So what do you see as your civic responsibility as an American?
Civic responsibility as an American is to be involved, to know what's going on, to know that it's not just my backyard, it's not just my workplace, it's not just my kid's school. What happens beyond my borders affects my life, my kids' lives, my family life, my neighbors. It affects all of us. There's no, you can never just say, not interested about what happens outside my yard, because what happens outside your yard affects you. It affects your neighbor. It's important that we all get involved. We're given the opportunity to do that, and if we choose not to take it, then shame on us.
Tell me about a memorable voting experience or your first time voting.
My parents always used to take me to the polling place with them, so it was something I was really excited about. It was I couldn't wait to get started voting. But the time that is most memorable to me was the '92 presidential election. I was, let's see, I turned 18 in mid-'80s. So the first one that was a really big deal to me, I mean, it was a big deal to go vote. I voted in all the local elections and all that sort of thing. But the '92 presidential election, I felt like things were changing. I felt like there was some good opportunity for some great things to happen. I showed up at the polling place, which at the time was, I was voting at, I think, P.K. Young And I expected to just walk in and walk out like I'd always been able to do, and I'd always done with my parents. But the line was around the building. I had to park down the street, and it was so exciting. It was the coolest thing to have to call into work and say, I'm going to be a little late. And we stood there for, it's become much more common now, but at the time, standing in line for 45 minutes to vote was unheard of to me. That was exciting. I'll always remember it.
What issues do people in Gainesville talk about locally, statewide, and nationally?
One of the things that I've learned in the process of going out and knocking on doors and campaigns, as well as the folks who come talk to us at City Hall, is that everybody cares about the same thing. When you strip all the other stuff away from it, people want to know that they live in a safe place, that the community is a good place for them to grow, for their children to grow up. They want to know that things are okay. It's a hierarchy of needs thing, obviously. They want to know that they're going to be okay, that their needs are met. And they don't, I've never had anybody come to my office and say, I'm only interested in my stuff. They want to know that the community is okay for the most part. There's stereotypes out there about all kinds of people, but when they come in and they sit down and regardless of what the topic is, what it really boils down to is, are things okay? How do we make things more okay? How do we make things more safe and better for me and for the people that I know, for my community?
How do national events like July 4th maybe, or Memorial Day or Veterans Day, how do they unite people from different backgrounds in Gainesville?
It's interesting that they really do unite people from different backgrounds. I feel it changing to some degree, because there are people who have a vested interest in keeping us separate and keeping us to not have mutual great things. But those community celebrations like the 4th and like Veterans Day and things, there's a thing we can rally around. We can rally around community. And in Gainesville, we have that weird, unique opportunity of homecoming, which, growing up, I assumed that everybody in every town had something like that. But as I've grown, I've learned that most communities don't really have something like that. And I see that changing too. But when I was a kid, you get Homecoming Friday off from the public schools. That's pretty great. And so I talk to my kids about that. I point out to them now, this is something that every community doesn't get. We all go down to University Avenue and watch the parade. You don't have to be a part of the university community. And growing up, I was not. But you don't have to be a part of that community to enjoy this civic occasion, this thing where we all come together and look at the floats and listen to the bands and just celebrate Gainesville, because it really is more about the community than it is about just UF. And I never realized when I was a kid how special that is, but I absolutely try to remind my kids how special it is. And my favorite time of the year, my favorite afternoon of the year is Homecoming Friday after the parade and before growl or anything like that. That time when not everybody's off work, but a significant portion of the community is off, and we're just thinking about how cool Gainesville is. That's my favorite afternoon of the year. I rambled a little there, but
It's great. And so we're done, but I just wanted to say, as I asked that question, about national holidays, the thing that really struck me was Gainesville's got its own national holiday, and that's homecoming. And
right.
and the fact that you mentioned it without me and having it is wonderful. So
Cool.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That was great.
Can you please tell me your name, your occupation, and where you're from?
My name is Helene Rhine. My occupation is retired public school teacher, and I'm from Gainesville, Florida.
So how would you define democracy?
How would I define democracy? I think one of the signatures of democracy is one person, one vote, and involving as many citizens as possible to vote and to make sure people come out and are involved in the political process, because many people say, well, it doesn't really affect me, I don't really care so I'm not going to vote. And then you say, yeah, but the people that are running, they really do care, and they're going to make decisions about your life. So active participation, I think, is democracy.
Tell me about a time that you participated in a political function or activity.
Well, we could go way back to the 1960s when I participated in the march against the Vietnam War in Washington. Or we can talk about right now when I am working with the Alachua County Supervisor of Elections and registering people to vote. In fact, about 10 days ago, I was at Buchholz High School where we registered 162 17 and 18-year-olds for their first time to vote ever. So yes, I've been involved in the political process for a lot of my life.
What are your civic responsibilities as an American?
I think being informed, being involved, discussing things with other people, probably also when you are abroad, having a positive look about you and not being an ugly American. I think spreading the good part of America is an important part of being a citizen.
Can you talk about a memorable voting experience or your first time voting or both?
Most memorable, I think, is when I was a little girl and election day used to be a national holiday. And so I remember going with my parents to my elementary school and going into that booth and them letting me pull the lever. So that's really my most memorable. I also have an interesting memorable experience. I guess it was 1972 and I was living in Puerto Rico. And at that time in Puerto Rico, the whole island shut down for election day. And it was very weird. Like everybody had to show up at their election spot like at noon. And of course I did absentee voter, but the streets were totally empty. It looked like there was nobody in the island at all. So those are kind of my two memorable voting experiences.
What issue do people in your community of Gainesville talk about? Local issues, national issues, state issues?
Here in Alachua County, a lot of people talk about growth. People talk about environment and certainly climate change. People talk about what's happening in Tallahassee, public education, civil rights. People here talk about the national agendas. So I think living in Gainesville is maybe unique, maybe not, that people are interested in both local, state, and national issues. So the whole gamut.
How do national events like 4th of July, Memorial Day, Veterans Day unite people from different backgrounds in Gainesville?
How do national holidays unite people from different backgrounds in Gainesville? I would have to say all kinds of different people go to watch the fireworks together. All kinds of different people maybe go to see that Memorial Day event on 8th Avenue. I'm not
Can you
sure.
tell us what that event is?
The event on 8th Avenue for Memorial Day, the Veterans for Peace put out tombstones with people's names and their dates, and where they were killed, being involved in American military activity. And it started, I guess, with Desert Storm, and it's gone all through Desert Storm and Iraq and Afghanistan, and it's a pretty moving memorial. It goes up and down the street, and many people from different backgrounds stroll along 8th Avenue on that day and pay attention to those tombstones.
How do people in Gainesville work together for the common good, or do they?
How do people in Gainesville work together for the common good, or do they? I don't know, do they? I don't know. I'm not really sure. Like the rest of the country, it's a pretty fractured group here in Alachua County. It's very diverse. It's both ethnically and socioeconomically and educationally. And I don't know. It seems to me when I go to events, it's very like-minded. So I don't know, maybe PTA meetings? I don't know.
Last question. Why did you get into working to register voters?
I'm retired, and as I said earlier, I think the one person, one vote is essential for democracy. And I think it's fairly well known that young people don't vote as much as older people. So I think it is important to get young people registered and interested and aware, because they certainly are our future. And hopefully they will be informed and be involved in the democratic process throughout their life.
I have a kind of follow-up question. In your work registering people to vote, do you have any memorable experiences maybe in that line of work that you'd like to share?
Well, most of my experiences of registering people to vote have been here at the UF campus and at schools. However, I did have an interesting experience. I was asked to register people to vote at a housing project for low socioeconomic and disabled people. And so I went there with some reservation. I didn't know what I was going to encounter. And what I encountered was the vast majority of the people there were already registered to vote. They were very thankful. They were very interested in the democratic process, and it left me feeling good about what I was doing.
Good.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
All right.
Tell me your name, your occupation, and where you live.
I'm Jean Chalmers. I'm a real estate agent in Gainesville, Florida.
How would you define democracy?
Well, I think of democracy as a place where the majority of the citizens get to elect a leader at every level. That means that over 50% of every citizen who votes would have the leader of their choice.
And at some point you were mayor of Gainesville. How did you get involved in civic service and politics?
It grew out of the civil rights movement. I learned in the civil rights movement how to organize, how to speak, and how to push an agenda. Good training to be on a city commission. So I knew that you had to have a certain amount of power to change anything. And I just got tired of doing it the quiet, gentle, ladylike way, and decided I really wanted to be up there where I could have some powerful influence.
Tell me about a time when you participated in a political function.
Oh my goodness, every function I had was political. But I think the most interesting one was when Dukakis lost the presidential race, and leading Democrats decided that the Democratic Party had to become more neutral. So they formed an organization called the Democratic Leadership Council, and I was asked to join that as sort of the token mayor in the country. It was formed by Lawton Childs and Buddy McKay from Florida, and Barbara Kearney, senator from somewhere up in New England. Corky Roberts' mother was from Louisiana, and the governor of Arkansas, Bill Clinton, and a few people at that level. And here I was, a little old mayor from Gainesville, Florida, in this august group. And our job was to try to pull the Democratic Party back to the middle, where it could get a majority of support.
Tell me about what you think are your civic responsibilities as an American.
I think the first thing that we need to do is learn our history and understand the Constitution and be very, very careful where we get our information.
Okay. Tell me about a memorable voting experience or the first time you voted in America.
You know, I'm Canadian, and my family's crossed the border every generation since the Revolution. So when I came to Gainesville, I was still a Canadian, and I had friends in the League of Women Voters, and the Supervisor of Elections, at that time, Alma Bethea, allowed us to go out and register voters, particularly in the, what in those days, Negro part of town. We were doing that at the same time in Alabama. They were putting African Americans in jail for trying to register. So I thought we were really a wonderful community to be doing this. But I was a Canadian, so I thought, oh my goodness, I'd better become American. If I'm out there registering voters, I better be able to vote myself. So I went to register, and Alma Bethea was just thrilled that I had become a citizen and was registering, and she said, oh, Jean, you've got to register as a Democrat because no Republicans ever run here.
And what year was that?
1963.
So what issues locally, statewide, and nationally do you see people in Gainesville concerned about?
I think we're really quite concerned with the gap between the rich and the poor. And certainly our elected officials are working in that arena to try to find those resolutions. As a realtor, I'm terribly concerned about housing for the poor, and the homeless people we have on our streets is just appalling. I've lived in third world countries, and my goodness, we look like a third world country. Anyone visiting us from England must think it's really strange in this land of plenty.
So how do national events like, say, 4th of July or Veterans Day or Memorial Day or even UF Homecoming, how do they unite people in Gainesville, people from different backgrounds, from different countries?
Yeah, I think events are very important, and particularly if they're based around a real patriotism, not this split thing that we have going on now. And certainly the 4th of July is the peak of patriotism of the Americans. Those who didn't like it went to Canada. Those who liked it stayed here and fought.
So how do people in Gainesville work together for a common goal, or do they?
No, I think they do. I think Gainesville people are really moderates, and so they don't run from either side when they hear of a problem or hear of an idea. They tend to study it, and we tend to take a very moderate step, careful step on all the issues we face. You know, we are a little blue dot in the middle of a purple state, so we do have a lot of people registered as Democrats here, but we also have a pretty large Tea Party, pretty large Green Party. We'll never really know how many people we're talking about in those smaller parties until we have ranked choice voting, and then we'll have a true picture of who makes up the voters of our town.
So do you have any more stories about your experiences with democracy or voting or civic participation?
No, mainly I have stories coming out of the civil rights movement. and the efforts that we had getting black people to have the courage to go and register to vote and finding ways to get them to the polls. I remember a group of us gathering enough money to rent a loudspeaker, which we put on the tops of our cars, and we drove through all the poor parts of town, not just the black parts. We went out into the boondocks to the little farming communities with our loudspeakers saying, "Come on, we'll give you a ride to the polls." I mean, that was really sort of made your spine tingle. It was such a great thing to do. And people would come, poor people would come, and we'd take them to the polls to vote. That's what it's all about. We've got to start doing that sort of thing again, because we're just leaving the poor out. We're seeing road work being done close to polling stations in black communities. And, you know, we don't give days off. Poor people, it costs them money to vote. And I know a woman not far from Gainesville that had to pay $41 to Uber to get into a station where she could have her picture taken, so she could have a picture ID to vote. We're really restricting voting too much now.
That's great. Anything else?
No?
Okay, we're good?
Yeah.
Okay, that's great.
Okay.
Could you please tell me your name, your occupation, and where you live?
I live at the University of Florida on campus. I'm University of Florida president, and my name is Kent Fuchs.
How would you define democracy?
For me, personally, democracy is the participation of citizens in choosing those that govern the citizenship and oversee organizations. But there are elected officials, and democracy is the process of individuals participating in those elections and decisions.
Tell me a time when an important time in your life when you participated in a political function. It could be as a youth, it could be as an adult.
In my role as the president of a public university, it's almost every week that I engage with elected officials locally at the state level and the federal level. So certainly personally, I participate in elections, and I've done that since graduating from college. I've never been an elected official, but as a university president, it's almost every day that I engage with an official that has an important role in influencing the future of our university.
And how do you see your civic responsibilities as an American?
Well, I will relate my civic responsibilities again to my function, which is in this point in time in my life as a university president. One of the special parts of our university is that it's large and it's public. By large, it means that we've had 54,000 students. Many of them, for the very first times in their lives, are thinking about registering to vote, thinking about which political party they may want to be aligned with, and hopefully actually even voting. And my role as the university president is to encourage them to be a part of that process, to be engaged, to register to vote for the first time in their lives, to show up at polling stations, and to cast their votes many times on campus and sometimes where they live or grew up back at their homes.
Do you have a memorable voting experience yourself?
I now vote by absentee ballot, so it's really kind of boring, but I have a lot of time to read and think about what I'm going to vote. Much of the voting experience is two things. You get a copy of the ballot in advance, which I think I've done throughout my life. Think about the process, but then you go stand in line, and for some reason I always choose the voting times and polls that take me a lot of time to vote, but I meet interesting people in those lines, so it's always a memorable experience.
As president of the university, we see a lot of political activism on campus. How do you relate that to the democratic process in America?
I love that a university that is large, that has brilliant students, is filled with passions about not just federal elections, not just state elections or even local elections, but even about student government. The tradition at the University of Florida has been for many decades that some of the most intense political discussions and campaigns have been around student government. Student government at the University of Florida oversees a large budget, and so the students care a lot about that process. But I also see them out tabling, out campaigning for national and local parties and national and local candidates. And I love that. I love that we have this diversity and the students feel passionate about it.
So what issues do people in your community, and by your community I probably mean the university community, what issues motivate them the most or engage them the most?
So for me personally, just in my role, the support of education, K through higher education, is very important. And our university, our state, the universities in our state are more dependent on our state government than almost any other state. Our state is more generous and our tuition is incredibly low. So we're really dependent, our future and our success on our state. But if you look across, I believe the students, the employees, the faculty of the university, they're going to care a lot about the physical environment, particularly because they live in the state of Florida. They're going to care a lot about immigration issues. We have a lot of students whose family members came from other countries. And they're going to care a lot about just the future of our democracy, the future of our nation, our state, after people my age are long gone.
One last question. How do national events like 4th of July or Veterans Day or Memorial Day or even UF Homecoming, how do they unite people in our community from diverse backgrounds? And how does that relate to democracy?
On a university campus and in a college town like Gainesville, Florida, you do indeed have a lot of people from other countries that come and are here to study, or their family members are here to study. So a lot of international students, and they want to be a part of the traditions of their new country, their new nation. So they often show up for holiday events. It could be a 4th of July parade, or it could be another holiday event. And you see the sparkle in their eyes as they're experiencing that for the first time. Our student body, I would say, are enjoying the fact they don't have classes and they get to go out and do something that is a little different. But in the town, particularly this town, because it's a small community, I get to see kindergarten kids, preschool kids out celebrating a parade and participating and joining with senior adults, veterans that have served in wars, and bringing each other together and celebrating the community as much as the nation and the democracy that we live in.
Well, thank you.
Okay, Steve, thank you.
Thank you.
Glad you're doing this.
Okay. Hi, could you tell me your name, your occupation, and where you live?
My name is Kim Barton. I'm the Supervisor of Elections for Alachua County, and I live in Gainesville, Florida.
Okay. How would you define democracy?
Well, to me, democracy is the opportunity for citizens to be able to exercise their right to vote and choose their elected officials, and so that they can participate and make their voice heard through their decisions.
Tell me about a time you participated in a political function.
Well, looking back, I ran for office for the first time ever in 2016. And as a candidate, I always worked in elections for years, but it changed the game running for office. And having to go in front of folks for the first time and speak was an awareness to me, wow, I'm actually running for office. So it was really exciting, and it just lets me know it was going to be quite different than working in the office and leading the office. So it was a wonderful opportunity to be able to talk with folks and answer questions that they had, but it was an awakening for me.
Tell me about what you think are your civic responsibilities as an American.
I think our civic duty, of course my civic duty as well as others, is to exercise their right to vote. Of course, be informed about your community, be informed about your government. Of course, support your community as well. Those are very important. You want me to keep going on?
Sure.
Because I got more.
Keep going. We got time. That's what we got.
But,
keep going.
Of course, serve on a jury duty. I did that the first time I ever did it. I felt proud to be a citizen and serve in that capacity. So that was, and of course, pay our taxes. We have to do that. But be a part of the community and be an informed citizen.
Talk about a memorable voting experience, either that you had or you had as a person in the Supervisor of Elections office.
My memory of a great voting experience, I met a gentleman who had never voted ever in his entire life. This black man was 85 years old. He told me he was ashamed and he didn't want anyone to know that he had not ever voted. And I told him, don't worry about it, let's get him registered to vote. And we were going to make sure that he was set and ready for to be able to vote in the upcoming election. Well, he was able to vote for the very first time at the age of 85 in the 2008 presidential election. I recall the tears in his eyes, the pride that he had having voted in that election. So it's never too late. The importance of voting, it's never too late regardless of your age.
That's perfect. What issues do people in Gainesville and Alachua County talk about, concern themselves about at a local level, at a state level, and at a national level?
Well, I think what I hear mostly about in all communities is equity. And in terms of elections, in which I oversee, one of the things that when I came into office, I wanted to make sure that we were serving all the citizens of Alachua County, regardless of the demographics, regardless of where they live, that we were making sure that information was getting out to everyone, and that our office serves everyone. But truly, that's the conversation on most people's heart is, here in Gainesville, Alachua County, it's equity and inclusion. That's the main topic that people are really concerned about. So as it relates to election, that was one of our primary goals because we want to make sure that we serve everyone, regardless of the demographics, regardless of where they live in the community, that we're providing the best service, whether it's educational, providing information. So,
okay, how do national events like July 4th or maybe Veterans Day or even Election Day unite people from different backgrounds in Gainesville?
I think it's a wonderful opportunity to reflect on our history. When you think about the 4th of July, American history, it unites us to make sure that we never forget our history, whether it's Veterans Day, and it brings people from different cultures together, and we can share in our experiences. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity. In terms of the elections office, we do participate in all of those events. We register people to vote. We provide information there as well. But I think it's a wonderful opportunity to celebrate.
Okay. One more question. How do people in Gainesville work together for a common goal? And that common goal could be equity.
I think that people come together, whatever the concerns may be. They may not affect you, but if we come together and work together, we can help one another. And that's what a community is all about, coming together to help each other. It may be something regarding children or schools. Even though I don't have any kids, I think it's still part of me being a part of the community to help and reach out and do what I can in that effort.
So please tell me your name, your occupation, and where you live.
My name is Scott Camil. I'm an organizer and an activist, and I live in Gainesville, Florida.
How would you define democracy?
Democracy is a system where the primary responsibility of the citizen is to control their government. And I don't think that our citizens are doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're not living up to their responsibility.
So building on that, what do you think are your civic responsibilities here in America under democracy?
So I think that the Government are our employees, and we are the employers. And it is our job to monitor what our employees do. And our employees have the right to think what they're doing is correct if we're not telling them that it's not. So when we monitor our employees, if they're doing something that we don't like, it's our job to straighten them out.
And tell me about a time when you participated in a political function, something that kind of excited you about politics or angered you about politics.
There were two events. Number one, when I was young, probably about 11, 12 years old, my grandfather ran for city commission in Miami. And so there were meetings at the house. One of my jobs was to knock on the door and hand out palm cards and to go out to all of those functions. So it was really exciting to me to hear what was going on and to go with my grandfather when he was meeting with different people and talking politics. The second thing is when I was came back from Vietnam and I felt that the government wasn't telling the truth about what we were doing. And I made appointments and I went to Washington to meet with my representatives. And I had a representative from Gainesville tell me that he'd been to Vietnam for 4 days and he knew what was going on and I didn't. And I was really surprised because I spent 20 months there.
Tell me about a memorable voting experience that you had or the first time you voted.
It's a little embarrassing for me. The first time I voted, I was in the Marine Corps. I voted for Wallace. I thought that Wallace would take care of the problem of civil rights, and I thought LeMay would take care of the problem of the war. And so now I'm a Bernie guy, so I've come a long way from
It's a very different thing. What issues do people in Gainesville talk about or are concerned about on a local level, on a state level, and a national level?
So on a local level, I'm on the Charter Review Commission. The county of Alachua is a charter county, and every 10 years citizens get to meet. There's a board appointed, so I'm one of the appointed commissioners, and we look at the rules and we change rules and we try to make those rules better. And in my circles, it's all about climate change, climate resilience, global warming, and protection of water.
How do national events like the 4th of July or Memorial Day or Veterans Day, how do they unite people from different backgrounds in Gainesville? And if you could talk about your experience with the Memorial Mile, that would really be wonderful.
So for July 4th to me is just a day. I don't celebrate July 4th. It's a meaningless day to me. Memorial Day weekend is a really important day to me. And in 2007, Veterans for Peace, which I'm the president of, the local chapter in Gainesville, set up a display of tombstones on 8th Avenue. And those tombstones are set up in order of theater and date of death. So it would be Afghanistan, 2001, 2002, 2003, Iraq, 2003, and it's like that. And we have about 6,900 tombstones. Each tombstone has the name of an American service member who was killed in Iraq or Afghanistan. It has their date of death, their age, their rank, and their hometown. And we set those tombstones up in order of date of death. And so you could come to the display over the Memorial Day weekend and you could say, Scott, my friend Joe Smith died in Iraq in 2009. I'd like to visit his tombstone. And we can walk you right to that tombstone. Some of the tombstones have flags on top of them, about 156 of them. And those are tombstones that have been visited by loved ones. And when a loved one comes and visits a tombstone, we give them a magic marker. They write a message on the tombstone. The messages are really powerful. And we put a flag on top of it so people know that those tombstones have been visited. This year, well, last year, 2019, the city of Gainesville renamed the stretch of road that we use Memorial Mile, and that's what we call the display, Memorial Mile. And they put up 2 historic markers and gave us a proclamation. So we're very appreciative that our local government appreciates what we're doing.
That's pretty powerful stuff. How do people in our community in Gainesville work together for the common good? Or maybe I should ask, do they work together for the common good?
Well, I'm a little mixed on that. There's a lot of good stuff going on, and I'm involved in the Sierra Club, which is about protecting the environment. I'm involved in Veterans for Peace, which is about peace and justice issues. And I'm involved in Stand By Our Plan, which is about protecting the comprehensive plan which protects our water. So I work hard on all of those things with those people. What disturbs me a little bit is that I graduated UF in 1973. And when I was a student, we had about 25,000 students. And on issues of war and peace and social justice, we would have demonstrations, and we'd have 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 students out in the street. Today, there's twice as many students, and there's a lot more problems, and I don't see where the students are, so that disturbs me a little.
Anything else you want to talk about your experiences and democracy and what it means to America or to other countries?
Well, I think that if you don't participate, you don't have a right to complain. We have tools to make change, and if we don't utilize those tools, that's our responsibility.
Perfect. Thank you.